Hello everyone, Dork Skeleton here again, and today we're going to finish the 67 fan-made cards made by Cold. And we're going to be starting this off with the Restless Warrior. I think we got about 20 cards left. So, the Restless Warrior is a 4-mana, 5/3 neutral minion. Deathrattle, give a random friendly minion, +2/+1. What comes to mind with this card is the 3-mana Priest card, a Dark Cultist, which is a 3/4. Deathrattle, give a friendly minion, +3 health. Now, from experience, I know that usually when you play Dark Cultist, you can't reliably get off its Deathrattle effect. Most people are competent enough to remove it after removing the other minions on the field, so guaranteeing this +2/+1 effect is actually kind of tough to do in most cases. Now, a 4-mana 5/3 is pretty bad stats, because of course, you're looking at either a 5/4, and 5/4s aren't really playable as average, or a 4/5, which is considered to be fairly good, but just a static 4/5 like a Chillwind Yeti isn't played anymore. So as a 5/3, its Deathrattle effect would have to be pretty good, and it gives 3 stats worth of stats, 2 in attack, 1 in health, which isn't so great, because I think generally you want to be giving creatures more health than attack. Just generally creatures like that will trade better, and trading is usually optimal to going face. Unless you're a counter, then okay, neglect that completely. I could kind of see this being run with something like Nerubian Egg, because the Deathrattle would make the egg spawn, and it's not like they can just kill the egg, because then they're giving you a Nerubian for free. And that might actually be pretty good, so this could be like a Deathrattle thing. But in general, I just think that the lack of consistency here makes it not so amazing. People will just remove your other minion and then use a Frostbolt on this guy, and you won't get the Deathrattle effect, so it's not such a great minion. But it is interesting, at least. Alright, next up we have Regenerate. Restore a minion to full health as a druid card, 2 mana, and then give it +1/+1 and Taunt. Well, it's kind of like combining a what's it called? Nature's Touch, a Healing Touch. That's what we're looking for, and then also giving a minion +1 and +1. So it's sort of a Healing Touch combined with a Mark of the Wild. Now, a Healing Touch is 3 mana, Mark of the Wild is 2 mana. And of course, this is 1 less attack, 1 less health than a Mark of the Wild. But neither of those cards are played at all, really. Maybe Mark of the Wild could see its way into some kind of crazy token deck and Nerubian Egg deck in the future, but right now, not really played. The thing here is, though, you would be wanting to play this on something like an Ancient of Lore. So an Ancient of Lore hits one of your opponent's minions, then you give it +1/+1, making it a 6/6 taunt, and it probably traded into something with 3 or 4 attack. So you could, in most cases, think of it like heal 3, heal 4, and then give it +1/+1 and taunt. In general, I would say that's probably better than Mark of the Wild, because 1 extra stats, maximum stats, kind of pales in comparison to healing 3 or 4. I would think in most cases. So this is a little bit better than Mark of the Wild, and maybe it could be playable. Would it just make Mark of the Wild completely obsolete? Quite possibly. And I'm not sure I like that aspect of it, but this could be a playable card, and it's reasonably interesting. Okay, next up, Red Drake. If you are holding a dragon, summon a 2/2 Whelp, 6 mana, 5/5. So effectively, that's 7/7 worth of stats, but 7/7 worth of stats that's not BGHable and gives you 2 creatures. If you're holding a dragon, which you would play this in a dragon deck, obviously, so it's not the hardest thing to pull off, but you do require the synergy. Now, a normal 6 mana minion, you would be thinking Boulderfist Ogre, a 6/7 for 6 mana. So that's not really OP to get 1 extra attack and splitting it between 2 minions. Just for the condition of having a dragon in your hand, I think that's actually fairly reasonable and actually pretty well balanced. Now, there are situations where having 2 minions is better than 1, and I would say having a 5/5 and a 2/2 is definitely better than having a 7/7 War Golem, without question. So, yeah, this could be a minion that could be played in Dragon decks, but nothing too special about that. Now let's see. Quillboar Chieftain. This card was actually the next one in the list, but I didn't really want to review it first because it's just so boring. A 5 mana 8/3. We already have a Salty Dog, which is a 5 mana 7/4. Never played, it's a pirate even. So even though it has pirate synergy, it's still awful. Salty Dog is mostly for the comic effect of hitting your opponents in the face and saying, "Let's get salty!" It's good BM. But this card is pretty awful. The only situation I could even see it being usable would be if you want to play it with something like Charge from a Warrior, making it a 8 mana charge the face for 10 damage, which, I mean, that's not abysmal, but it does take 2 cards, and it's still kind of a little bit inferior to Grimace Hellscream. So, I don't know if that would be a thing. But, it's a card. There might be a situation in the future where something like 8 attack here could be really abusable. But, in general, just a very, very mediocre card. Or below average and awful on Arena as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this legendary. Rot Face, 6 mana 6/6. Enemies cannot be healed. That's interesting. So it's weaker than a Boulder Fist Ogre by 1 stat, 1 less health, which does matter. I kind of think of this card as like a Lothab, which is 5/5. Your opponent basically can't play spells for a turn, and this would be like a 6/6. Your opponent can't heal for a turn. Now, preventing your opponent from healing is not incredibly useful unless A, you're fighting a priest and you want to prevent the circle of healing, or B, you're trying to push lethal and your opponent might have a heal bot in his hand. Then that actually becomes crazy good. So you could actually use this in a deck that's really trying to prevent your opponent from having a comeback at all. Turn 5 Lothab, prevent him from playing any spells. Turn 6 Rotface, prevent him from playing any healing, and that could actually be a pretty big deal. If you play this on the right turn, your opponent's comeback strategy to play an antique heal bot just fails and they die. So this could actually be a card that could be played, given how much people like to heal with antique heal bot. Is it balanced? I think it's the kind of card you'd have to see it in actual play. If you play it on the wrong turn, it's just a 6/6, which is mediocre. If you play it on the right turn, you win the game because you prevented the antique heal bot. So it's a card where if you're good at the game and you know exactly the right turn to play it, then it can become very strong. I'm not sure it's necessarily healthy for the game because it would push something like a mid-range hunter even further into viability, and it's already a very strong deck just because it seals the game out. Well, would you actually run it in mid-range hunter because you do already have Savannah Highmanes? Maybe. Maybe you'd run it in addition to it. It's hard to say. It's a pretty tough to evaluate card, but could be very strong. Could also be pretty mediocre. Very good against anti-heal bot. Okay, next up, Rotting Ghoul. A 3 mana 2/1, which is awful stats. Deathrattle, return this minion to life with full health. Interesting that Cold would release a card like this. Fan-made, of course, it's not a real card. Because they actually announced for the Grand Tournament the 4 mana Death Charger, I think it's called. No, that's the next Almas card. Dreadsteed, that's what we're looking for, which is a 1/1 Deathrattle summon a Death Charger. And that costs 1 more mana, has 1 less attack. And that's the card they actually put in the game. I think with a card like this, 2 attack and 1 mana, 3 mana, comes back every turn. That's actually probably OP. People point out that, 4 mana 1/1 that comes back every turn is weak. And they do have to keep it intentionally weak, because if it was strong, if it was like 3 mana 2/1, it would be played pretty commonly, especially as a common. And it would dramatically change the game. It would basically mean no matter how much control, you can never come back, and it would become really popular. So with a card like this, token decks might dominate. I mean, you just solve the forest. After you put a couple rotting ghouls on the field, if they even think of killing your ghouls, then you just get more treants and you get your ghouls back. Throw down Kel'Thuzad or something like that. Your 2 ghouls turn into 4. It can really grow out of hand. And for 3 mana, that is pretty powerful. I think that's too strong because it's supposed to be a niche card. With stats like this and a mana cost that low, it might actually change the game too dramatically. Now the Dread Charger, or whatever it's called, it probably won't be played, and I think they intentionally made it so that it was so weak, so that it can't be played commonly. It has to have a very unique setup, and it's not going to be a card that's so strong that it just dramatically changes the game, because a Deathrattle effect that returns a card to the field every single turn, and the only way you can get rid of it is silence, is a dangerous mechanic to put in the game. It really is. So they have to be careful with that. Okay, next up, Ruby Draconoid, a 4-mana 4/4 dragon. If your opponent has 15 or less health, gain +1/+1, which would make it a 5/5. Very much along the lines of Draconoid Crusher, or Draconid Crusher rather. A 5/5 for 4 mana is actually pretty dang good stats. A 4/4 for 4 mana is pretty mediocre stats. So you kind of take the average of that, and you'd say, okay, it's kind of like a 4/5 or a 5/4. But it's really not, because actually getting your opponent to 15 health, especially by turn 4, which would be when you'd want to play your 4-drop, obviously, is not really feasible. Think about it. The Draconid Crusher becomes a 9/9 for 6 mana, and that's still a completely unplayable card right now. Now, with the other cards that Cold released for this set, maybe Aggro Dragon could become more of a thing, and then Draconid Crusher could be played. But I just don't see this guy really working out. It's not at the right mana point where you'd want to buff it up like this. If you play it like a turn 7, 4 mana, 5/5, it's like, meh? I could do that, or I could just play Dr. Boom. I don't think this card would see play, even if there was an aggressive dragon deck, or even a face dragon deck, unless the face dragon deck can get you to 15 health by turn 4, in which case the game is broken, because something is more aggro than Face Hunter, or at least as aggro as Face Hunter. Okay, next up. Ruby Flameblade, 2 mana, 2/1, give a friendly dragon charge as a battle cry. Well, there were some other cards that were mentioning giving dragons charge. However, those cards costed a lot more mana. And giving charge as a battle cry for 2 mana means you can play this a lot later on as a combo. Combine this with some other dragons you want to charge the face with. Basically, there was the other card, Purple Netherwing Drake, as a charge card. You have the Proto Drake. Your dragons have charge, and if you combine all of these crazy dragon charge minions, and give the ones that don't have charge as well, that's a lot of face. That really is, and I feel scared about the idea of giving a minion charge as a battle cry effect, and you still get a 2/1 off the back of it. Yeah, 2/1 isn't very powerful, but keep in mind they had to nerf charge down to a 3 mana plus 2 attack plus charge spell, which doesn't have a minion associated with it, and that's a warrior card. This is a neutral dragon, which means it has dragon synergy. Proto Drake could give this charge as well. And this gives any dragon you want charge. You could give, like, let's say you had Tharzan in the hand, you could give your, let's say, Nefarian charge or Onyxia charge for 8 damage to the face. And then that becomes a really strong effect. Like, really? Charge is about as powerful as giving something Wind Fury? Roughly. I mean, the circumstances change. But you'd think like Wind Speaker, which is a 3/3 for 4 mana, give a minion Wind Fury. That card's balanced because you have to pay 4 mana for it. 2 mana becomes really dangerous with charge, because that just opens up a lot of abuse possibilities. Not sure I like the card. definitely would push an aggressive playstyle with dragons. There's no doubt about that. In fairness, it does have a weak body, but if you're playing a face deck, does it really matter that much that it only has 1 health? Okay, next up. Rupture. 3 mana, deal 2 damage, combo your opponent discards a random card. Okay, so there's another card that your opponent would start discarding cards. You could sort of compare it to something like Arcane Intellect, which would be draw 2, and then... Oh, kind of you could compare it to that. It's like half a reverse Arcane Intellect, and then deal 2 damage. It's half an Arcane Intellect and half an Eviscerate, but it does require combo. I think if it didn't require the combo, this card would be pretty dang strong, especially if you're just trying to run your opponent out of cards, and maybe there were some other discard cards. Could become pretty dangerous. At this point, I would think, okay, maybe your opponent plays a Knife Juggler and they already had a minion on the field, they're playing aggressively, so you do like a Backstab Rupture, clear their board, and discard a card out of their hand. But they happen to be playing Face Hunter, so that 1 card is just devastating for them to lose. That could be pretty good. Against more control decks, just losing 1 card doesn't really give each card advantage over your opponent. Though if you do kill something with the 2 damage, it's okay. I think this card is fairly well balanced. It's just, it brings up the question again, do you want to include card discard in Hearthstone? They have it in Magic the Gathering? I don't know if it belongs in Hearthstone or not. I mean, we are playing with 30 card decks, and if you include too many card discard cards, your opponent could only ever get to play like 5 cards, and then the rest just discard. Well, okay, that's not totally true, because they always get to top deck. But I think card discard would be really devastating in Hearthstone. So it's one of those things you want to be careful about putting in the game, if Blizzard ever decides to do it. Next up, Savage Raptor, a 6 mana, 6/4 beast. Whenever this minion kills another minion, gain +1 attack. This card is pretty awful, and the reason for that is, for 6 mana, you're basically getting something that's not going to kill many minions on your opponent's side of the board. The only way you could really make this work is if you're going to do something like Marker of Nature this for the taunt, making it a 6/8 taunt. And then, yeah, I guess your opponent has to trade minions into it, but they're going to wait until they just can kill it outright. Or they're going to send 1 guy into it and then they're going to big game hunter it. So, with stats like 6/4, you want to be going face. You don't really want to be trading. And I think baseline, at most, this is going to kill 1 minion and then maybe get to go face once. But more likely, it's going to kill 1 minion and the opponent is going to Arcane Shot it or whatever. Maybe run a 1/1 Paladin token into it and it's dead. So for 6 mana, that's really underwhelming. I think I would take a Boulderfist Ogre over this any day, honestly. The only thing going for it is that it's Beast Synergy, but just having Beast Synergy doesn't make it good enough. Lost Tailstrider, 5/4 for 4 mana. Its average stats as Beast Synergy, but that's not played. This has below average stats. It's not going to be played. Especially for 6 mana, because generally Beast decks you're thinking Hunter, and 6 mana is a big cost to pay for a 6 mana card. Okay. I mean for a 6/4 card. Scarlet Knight, 4 mana, and I see Deathrattle Divine Shield on the card, so that sounds exciting. Okay, it's a 4/4 for 4 mana. Epic. Whenever this minion attacks a minion with Deathrattle, gain Divine Shield. Oh boy. That is crazy. So you get the Divine Shield before you even attack the minion, and then the Deathrattle minion is just gonna die. It's basically like immune to Deathrattle minions when you're attacking. This card, if you're up against a Deathrattle deck, and you have initiative, is godly. Though, in fairness, it's not like it has charge, and it can be removed fairly easily. It's not really going to keep Divine Shield on it. More likely, it's going to hit the board, your opponent's going to deal 4 damage to it, and it's going to die like a mediocre 4-drop. But, if you can put this on the board, hit your opponent's minions, Piloted Shredder is really popular, so if you go first and you play Scarlet Knight, or you coin into Scarlet Knight, they're basically prevented from playing Piloted Shredder, and that is actually something to consider, because Piloted Shredder is the most popular 4-drop, I'm pretty sure. That's kind of a big deal. But what your opponent will probably do is just adapt their strategy, like change their mind. Oh, okay, so you played that Frostbolt Ping instead. It does kind of delay your opponent, but I'm not sure it's worth playing in a deck just to counter 1 or 2 cards like that. Yeah, okay, it's not even that good against Sylvanas, because, yeah, if you kill Sylvanas without taking any damage, then they just get your Scarlet Knight. Good against Piloted Shredders. The Deathrattle meta really isn't there anymore. It's not like this is Undertaker Town. But if that kind of thing ever happened again, I could see it maybe seeing play. It's interesting. It's niche. It's kind of the equivalent of something like Blood Knight. Situationally good. It's a tech card. And it's not overpowered otherwise, so I think it would be fine to include a card like this in the game. And because it's an epic, that's kind of what you expect from epic cards. Cards that are very niche in their use and not generally all that powerful. Okay, Scorpion, 1 mana, 1/1, destroy any minion damaged by this minion. And it's a beast. It's hard to really evaluate. Okay, the closest comparison would be the 2 mana 1/1 Rogue card, which is the Silent Assassin, I think, or the Patient Assassin, rather. The only difference between this card and that card is this card is a beast and that card is stealth. Stealth is a pretty big deal, and for a card like this, yeah, I guess you could say +1 mana kind of makes it worth the stealth, because you want to hold on to it until you get that perfect trait. With this minion, yeah, it's probably going to die instantly, but what if it doesn't? If it doesn't, you could kill something big, and I guess that's the reason why you'd play this card like as a control hunter card. If your opponent doesn't have a board, they have to spend a spell on it, or at least a Fire Blast Ping. And if they don't have any good plays, they might have to lose like a 4 or 5 drop minion. However, of course, that's going to be rare. It's so susceptible to Fan of Knives, to Arcane Explosion, anything like that. It's either a good control card or anti-big taunt, like good against Sludge Belcher kind of card, or it's just not really worth playing because it just dies to everything. However, given that it's 1 mana, if your opponent has to spend a card to remove it, then that's not so bad for you, especially if it was a 2 mana spell or something like that. Could be a Holy Smite, could be... what if they have to Consecration it? I could see this card actually being pretty strong, just because of what it forces your opponent to do, to play suboptimally, to have to destroy it with the Consecration, etc. And for that reason, I would be skeptical about actually wanting to put it into the game, because it's either going to be removed for about an equal trade, or it's going to get extreme value, and giving extreme value to a 1 mana minion is really dangerous. You know what? This would actually be deadly with 1 card that comes to mind, and that's Tundra Rhino. 6 mana, you charge in Scorpids to destroy any minion on your opponent's side of the board. That combo alone makes this card really broken, I think. 7 mana, throw 2 Scorpids at your opponent. Oh look, your 2 Molten Giants just died immediately. Is that OP though? Because then you do have to play Tundra Rhino, and the Hunters kind of have a card already like that, the Hunter's Mark, which is sometimes played 1 copy of. I don't know. This card is somewhere from mediocre to really good, and I'd put it somewhere in the middle. Though, I would be hesitant to put it in the game, just because of its potential. Okay, next up, Shot of Anger. Enrage. Enemy spells cost 2 more next turn. 4 mana, 4/4. Interesting card. Enrage has always been plus attack, I'm pretty sure. Except for Raging Worgen, which is plus attack and Wind Fury. Now, what the game has been missing for a while is actually new Enrage cards. I don't think there's been a single one since vanilla. But I do like this effect. It enrages, your opponent's spells cost 2 more. And what you could do is keep healing it back up to full and then re-enraging it again to basically seal out your opponent's spells somewhat. Not completely, though, because it's only 2 mana. 4 mana, 4/4, though? Is that a strong effect for a 4 mana minion, given that it only has 4/4 stats? I think that's about balanced. The effect is decent, and I think the effect is worth about 1, maybe 1.5 stats, depending on your situation, depending on exactly how your deck is built, so it could see some play. It definitely could, but it's not game-breaking. If you only get the stats, it kind of sucks. A 4/4 is not good stats. So having a slightly better than average effect that does require setup because it does have to be enraged is reasonable. I think that card is fairly well balanced. Okay, Siamat. The 6 mana 6/6 genie kind of thing. Battle Cry. Shuffle 2 random enemy minions into your opponent's deck. I assume that means minions on the field. So basically, you're talking about Recycle, which is a 6 mana druid spell that recycles an opponent's minion as a spell. 6 mana, once again. And this is a 6 mana minion that recycles 2 minions and has 6/6 stats. This card, absolutely game-breaking. I know Recycle is not a good card, but I think Recycle would at least be worth 4 or 5 mana. 2 Recycles and a 6/6 minion for 6 mana? You've got to be kidding me. Absolutely game-breaking. For this to be balanced, it would have to be maybe like a 3/3. Even then, that sounds really strong. Maybe even like a 2/2. Maybe like a 3/3 that recycles a random enemy minion. I think a 3/3 that recycles 1 enemy minion for 6 mana, that might be balanced. Maybe a 4/4 at most, but a 6/6, 2 enemy minions? No way. I'm sorry, no way. Just no way. Okay. 3 mana, Sleeping Guard, 2/6 Taunt, kind of makes you think of the Ancient Watcher. It does have Taunt, though. Without the Taunt, yeah, Ancient Watcher would be better, and this card wouldn't see play. I think this card is actually really strong for anti-aggro, because, A, your opponent doesn't want to silence it, because then you have a 2/6 for 3 mana, and B, you don't have to include a Taunt, like a Taunt giver in your deck. You don't need Defender of Argus, you don't need Sunfury Protector. I think this card is actually slightly on the OP side. I would like to see its stats go down to 2/5 Taunt, can't attack, and that might be a little bit more balanced. At 6 health, with no drawback like a Death Lord, except for the fact it can't attack, but if you're playing like a Handlock deck, you don't really care about attacking with your early minions, you just want to not die. This card becomes OP for control decks, and alone would pretty much shut out most Face Hunter type decks. So, a 2/5 would be more balanced in my mind. 6 health is just a ton for a 3 health minion, and the 2 attack is enough to take out anything they're going to play on turn 1 and 2. So, that's just really heavy anti-aggro, and would make the game go late. This card would change the meta, and make it a late game meta, I think. To some degree. Because it's 6 health, your opponent has to deal. You could kind of think of it as kill 1 or 2 of your opponent's minions and heal 6 health. And that's crazy value for 3 mana. Okay, next up, Soothing Bard. 3 mana, 2/4. At the end of your turn, restore 3 health to your hero. You would be comparing this against the Illuminator, which is a 3 mana, 2/4. If you're holding a secret, heal 4 mana at the end of your turn. And the thing about that card is, specifically, you'd have to be playing a slow secret stack. It's not really played much. But with this card, you're guaranteed to heal for 3. Always you're guaranteed. And if it lives multiple turns, then it just turns into basically a better heal bot. For 3 mana, I think that's a little too much healing. I would probably like to see this card as restore 2 health to your hero at the end of your turn. 3 mana 2/4 stats alone is not that bad stats, especially if you're just going for the anti-aggro, trying to bash those weak minions like Wolf Rider or Knife Juggler. 3 health is a little too much, especially if you combine that with the Sleeping Guard. It's just too much anti-aggro. It really just shifts the game towards a late game control style. Okay, next up. Sucker Punch. 5 mana, deal 5 damage. Combo, and take control of your opponent's weapon. Okay, you could kind of compare this to, say, not Assassinate, but the one that destroys your opponent's weapon and destroys a random enemy minion. I can't actually think of what I'm thinking of, but I already said the effect. It's the rogue card that costs 4 mana. So, Sabotage, that's what I'm thinking. So 5 mana, 5 damage. Targeted 5 damage is usually enough to destroy 80% of minions, and it's targeted. So, right there, that's kind of like having an Assassinate. You could kind of think of it as how Fireball is to Polymorph, as Sucker Punch is to Polymorph. No, Sucker Punch is to Assassinate, rather. Same mana cost, but usually you'd run the Fireball, because you dealing 6 or 5 damage is usually enough to take out most minions anyway, but it also has the versatility of hitting your opponent's face. And that's a big deal, especially when you're playing a rogue deck, and especially when, if you combo it, you take control of your opponent's weapon. So, let's say you're going up against a warrior. You don't have a weapon on the field, but let's say you Sinister Strike. Okay, your opponent takes 3 damage. You Sucker Punch. Your opponent takes another 5 damage. You're up to 8 damage for 6 mana. And then you take control of your opponent's Death Spite. You hit your opponent for another 4 damage in the face. And then they've taken 12 damage so far. Possibly even less, because you'd probably play it with a preparation. And in that case, you're getting like 9 damage for 5 mana. Or a 2 mana preparation combo for 2 cards. I think this card is probably slightly on the strong side. Possibly too strong. It makes it really easy for rogues to get lethal against other weapon classes if the situation comes up. It would be a little too strong against weapon classes, though in fairness only 3 or 4 classes in the game actually have weapons, and against everything else it's just deal 5 damage for 5 mana. So, given that it's situationally OP, but regularly just kind of pretty meh, 5 damage for 5 mana isn't that great. I guess it's overall pretty balanced. You could say Sabotage is OP because it kills a minion and it kills their weapon. Which you could get like, you have a dead Ysera and you destroy the True Silver Champion. Wow, so OP. You just killed like 13 mana worth of cards. Or 11 I guess, because you'd have half a True Silver. For 4 mana combo. Broken, right? But Sabotage is okay. It's not really run that much. So I guess Sucker Punch would kind of fall into the same category. It would be an interesting card to see in the game though, because you would pull wins against things like Patron Warrior right out of your ass. Anyway, next card. Tovir Watchman. 4 mana, 3/6. Enrage gain Taunt. Now 3/6 stats for 4 mana, that's pretty dang good. You'd compare this to Sentient Shieldmaster, which just has Taunt the moment it comes out. I don't think actually having to enrage it to gain the Taunt is that big of a deal, because so they get attacks in one turn, that's okay. You just need to block attacks the next turn. Well, actually, is blocking the attacks immediately a big deal? I think there's something to be said about it, but I'd rather have +1 HP. I think this is a better Sentient Shieldmaster in 90% of cases, because the +1 health matters more than having the Taunt immediately, unless you're trying to prevent lethal, in which case they're probably just going to silence your Taunt anyway. So a fairly strong card. Is it game-breaking? No, of course not. Is it okay to have a little bit of power creep, given that, you know, we're moving forward with expansion sets and we have the Angels of Light and Darkness, which are definitely power creep cards? I think that's totally fine. This card would be okay to include in the game. And it's not like Sentient Shieldmaster would be completely unplayable anymore. I just think people would probably run this, generally speaking, over Sentient, but that's okay. Tremor Totem. 4 mana, 0/5 at the end of your turn, silence all enemy minions. Well, it has 5 health. That's something to mention because it's kind of like a pseudo taunt for 5 health, but it won't kill any of the opponent's minions. So you could think of it more like heal for 5 and silence all enemy minions. Is that worth playing? Well, I would consider draw a card to be a better effect than heal 5 in most cases. And it's not really heal 5 because if your opponent has lethal, they're still going to go for lethal. You are comparing this card to Mass Dispel. No way in hell is your opponent just going to let you silence 2 or 3 waves of minions, so you're basically getting 1 silence all minions effect. Mass Dispel, 4 mana, draw a card, and silence all your enemy minions. Never run. It's a priest card. It's a spell. I think this card would pretty much end up the same way. The only thing going for it is it has Totem synergy, and in the new set, they do have some interesting totem cards, like the one where if you use your hero power, it buffs all your totems by +2 attack. And let's say you play this on turn 8 or 9, get to silence all your opponent's minions, then you play your hero power on the back of this, and then it becomes a 2/5. A 2/5 that silences all your enemy minions is actually pretty damn good. So you'd have to play it in a totem synergy deck. Beyond that, it sucks. It's only worth anything if it actually does get a stat buff to make it a real creature. Because the 0/5 isn't that great. If you have like a 1/6, that's something. It's sort of like having a ghetto Morgashon Warden, which is a terrible card, but at least it blocks stuff and does damage and fights aggro. I think this card might be a one-of in a totem deck, specifically a totem deck. And that's only because of the new Totem synergy, which is pushing totems to be fairly powerful in Shaman. Okay, 2 more cards left. Troll Axe Thrower, 5 mana, 3/5, deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion as an Inspire effect. You can tell this card was made after the Grand Tournament was announced. Deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion. 3/5, so you have below average stats, which means you need the Inspire effect for it to be worth it. And most Inspire cards I've noticed are kind of like that. You get below average stats, you use Inspire once, and it becomes an okay card. It becomes on par with other 5-drops. But then, if you use it 2 times or more, it becomes good. And I think that's the balance point for Inspire cards. So, having it right at that center point where, you know, if you're playing an Inspire deck, maybe you have the Garrison Commander, you use this twice, gets to proc its effect twice. Assuming you have that dream board where you can actually get these guys out of the field in conjunction, then it's really good. Otherwise, it's kind of meh, and that's fine. That's fine. It just encourages Inspire decks, and I think I actually like this guy. This would be a card I would almost expect, Blizzard to create something like. They have a similar card, the 4 mana 2/5, the Dwarven Axe Flinger, which doesn't require Inspire, but whenever it takes a point of damage, it throws a 2 damage axe at your opponent's face. And having that pseudo Enrage effect is a little easier to get than a Inspire effect off. But the Inspire effect does damage to minions, and dealing damage to minions is better for control. It's a bigger deal. So this is a balanced card. I like it. Last card, Warcry. 3 mana. Trigger a friendly minion's battle cry. For 3 mana. Interesting. When would you want to use that? I guess if you have an Ixia on the field and all your whelps are already dead, in that dream scenario you use Warcry and you get 6 1/1 whelps. However, that's a dream scenario. Let me think. You could use this with Nefarian and get 2 random spells from your opponent's class for 3 mana, which is kind of like a bad Arcane Intellect. You could use it in conjunction with, I don't know, like a Dame Clank Junker? What's that guy called? The 2/5, 4 mana mech warrior card that gives +2/+2 to a friendly mech. But that's like 2 mana worth of stats. I think 3 mana is too much for this card, actually. There are very few battle cries which are worth 3 mana on their own. I think that the mana cost should be rebalanced to 2. I really don't think that's unreasonable. Sometimes you get more value, but I mean, think of Battle Rage. Battle Rage can get insane value. But I think if Battle Rage was 3 mana, It might still see play in Patron, but it wouldn't be nearly as good. So, triggering one battle cry is not really worth 3 mana. It should either be trigger all friendly minion battle cries, where it becomes like a win the game more card, or it should be a 2 mana trigger a friendly minion's battle cry. For the circumstances when you have a real good battle cry minion on the field, maybe you can use Lotheb's effect again. Or you could even make it 2 mana trigger a targeted minion's battle cry. That could be interesting. That might be a little strong though. Anyway, it's an interesting concept. It would not really see play as 3 mana trigger a friendly minion's battle cry, because there's just too few effects which are worth the 3 mana there, let alone 3 mana and a card. But it's an interesting concept. And that's all for the 67 cards for Cold's collection, fan-made cards. Pretty cool to look through these. A lot of the legendaries in summary were pretty dang OP. Bazul, Herald of the Fell. Let me bring that up again. Battle Cry, deal 3 damage, restore 5 health to your hero as a 5/4. Broken, Siamat, Beyond Broken. Shuffle 2 of your opponent's cards into the deck, even if it was return 2 minions to the hand. Oh my god, just no. Especially as a neutral minion, that's just crazy. Let's see, what was another one? That Hunter legendary, the... can I find it? I don't know. Here we go. And Goldrin. But, you know, there were some underpowered cards too, and overall, I think that the balance was actually not too unreasonable, so, good job with these cards, Cold. I mean, I'm sure you put a lot of effort into them. And you got some interesting ideas here, and hopefully Blizzard will implement some of these ideas in the future. I would like to see something like a Dragon aggro deck. There's just not enough Dragon minions, which are low cost right now, that are really that playable. And that's an issue. Because basically, if you want to play Dragon, you have to play late game control, and even then it's just not good right now. But we'll see how things go going forward, because we still have half of the Grand Tournament cards coming out. They just released a 10/10 Ice Howl, which allows you to charge for 9 mana, but it can't attack your opponent's face. That's probably a pretty mediocre card. But, you know, who knows? They'll come out with more stuff. A lot of the cards, they seem to be really niche, but that's okay. There won't be meta changers all the time, but they'll find a use. I'll find a use for a lot of them. We'll just have to play around with it a bit. So anyway, I've been Dark Skeleton. Thank you for listening and watching this video on 67 fan-made cards reviewed. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to let me know in the comments section down below. If you want to get in contact with the original author of these cards, battle tag is Cold number 1207 on the US servers. And I will see you all next time.